Black Waitress realized what the mob didn't, and saved the mob boss before. The evening air in the upscale restaurant was thick with tension. It wasn't the usual busy night at Joe's Steakhouse, but there was something different tonight. The buzz of quiet conversation, the clinking of glasses, the shuffle of waitstaff moving swiftly between tables, all of it felt like background noise to a drama that was unfolding in real time. At a corner table near the back, Dante Romano, the youngest and most feared boss in the entire mafia syndicate, sat with his associates. He was a towering figure, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that spoke volumes about his wealth and power. His sharp jawline and dark eyes were the kind that could send a chill down anyone's spine, even the most hardened criminals. The mafia world had long respected him, and fear of him spread like wildfire across the city. No one dared to challenge him, and for good reason. As he sat in the middle of the restaurant, casually discussing business with his men, it was clear that this wasn't just a dinner meeting. This was a stage for something far more dangerous. The others at the table, two older men and a younger associate, listened intently, their eyes flicking between each other, unsure of what to say next. Meanwhile, the rest of the restaurant seemed to shift around them, as if they too were waiting for something to happen. But no one noticed the young woman in the corner of the room, wiping down the tables. Her name was Emily, and she was just one of many waitresses who worked here, but she was different. Emily wasn't just any waitress. She had grown up on the streets, learning how to read people and situations in ways most people couldn't. Her eyes never missed a detail, and tonight, those details mattered more than anything else. As she passed by the mafia boss's table, something caught her attention. There was a man in the corner of the room, watching the boss closely. He had a strange look on his face, his eyes darting nervously between the group at the table. Emily had a hunch, but she couldn't afford to be wrong. She didn't know why, but something about him felt off. She glanced at the others sitting at the table, trying to keep her face neutral, as she made her way back to the kitchen. As Emily set the dirty glasses down, she overheard a piece of conversation that made her stomach twist. The group at the mafia boss's table was talking about a rival gang's move, and one of them mentioned something about getting rid of the boss tonight. Her heart raced. She knew what that meant. A hit was planned for Dante Romano, the mob boss who sat just a few feet away, oblivious to the danger. She didn't know what to do. No one would believe her if she spoke up. But she couldn't just stand there. She had to act. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about saving the one person who could change everything for her. She thought about it for a moment. Then, without hesitation, she walked over to the table where the mafia boss sat. Her steps were quiet but deliberate. Dante glanced up at her as she approached, his piercing eyes locking onto hers. She was nervous, but she had a job to do. "Excuse me, Mr. Romano," she said softly, her voice steady despite the rush of fear in her chest. "I think you're in danger. There's someone in the room who's planning to kill you." He looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Everyone at the table turned their attention to her, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The room fell silent as Emily's words echoed through the air. Dante Romano's sharp gaze never wavered from her face, his dark eyes scanning her, trying to read her. She could feel the weight of his stare, as though his eyes were cutting right through her, assessing whether she was telling the truth or if she had some other motive. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Emily's pulse raced, but she held her ground, refusing to back down. She had already made up her mind. If she didn't speak now, if she didn't act, Dante might not walk out of this restaurant alive. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice low and controlled. "What are you talking about?" His words sent a chill through Emily's spine, but she didn't hesitate. "There's someone in the room," she said, her voice steady. "Someone who's planning to kill you tonight." The mafia boss raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but not fully convinced. Emily could see the wheels turning in his mind as he processed her words. He exchanged a glance with his men, who looked more confused than worried. "You're telling me one of my guys is going to try to kill me?" Dante's voice was cold, almost mocking. Emily swallowed hard. "I overheard them," she said quickly, glancing toward the table where one of the men had been acting strangely. "They were talking about making their move tonight. They think you won't see it coming." There was a brief flash of uncertainty in Dante's eyes, but it was gone almost as quickly as it had appeared. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable, then glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on his men. Emily felt her heart pounding in her chest, the seconds stretching into what felt like hours. She was beginning to doubt herself, wondering if maybe she had been wrong, if maybe she was just paranoid. But she had to stay strong. This was her only shot. Finally, Dante broke the silence. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid," he said, his voice still calm, but the intensity behind his words made Emily's stomach tighten. She wasn't sure if he was angry, impressed, or both. But she didn't care. "I'm telling you the truth," she replied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "You're in danger, and if you don't do something now, it'll be too late." Dante leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes narrowing as he studied her. He wasn't looking at her like a servant anymore. His expression was different now, more thoughtful. "And why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice low, but there was a hint of curiosity behind it. Emily didn't know what to say at first. Why should he trust her? She was just a waitress, no one special. But then she thought about everything that had led her to this moment, the way she had always been able to read people, the way she had survived all these years by trusting her instincts. She took a deep breath and spoke with more conviction than she had ever felt before. "Because I'm the only one who's noticed. You're surrounded by people who think you're invincible. But I've been paying attention. I've seen things. I know what's happening." Dante studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Then, he did something that surprised her. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The other men at the table tensed, but Dante waved them off with a casual gesture. He didn't take his eyes off Emily as he walked toward her. When he reached her, he stopped just inches away, his presence overwhelming. For a moment, she thought he might say something cruel or dismissive, but instead, he simply looked at her, his gaze intense but not hostile. "You've got guts," he said quietly. "I'll give you that." Emily didn't know how to respond, so she stayed silent. Dante gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then turned his back on her and walked back to his seat. His men were still looking at him, waiting for orders. The room was still filled with tension, but now there was something different in the air. A shift, as if the dynamic had changed. "You," Dante said, pointing at one of the men who had been sitting closest to him. "Get up. I want you to go check on the situation." Now, the man nodded quickly and left the table. Emily's heart was still racing, but she felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had gotten through to him. Dante looked at her again, this time with a hint of something more than just suspicion. Maybe it was respect, maybe something else, but it was different. He had believed her. "You stay here," he said, his voice firm. "We'll talk later." Emily nodded, still unsure of what was going to happen next. She had risked everything to save him. But would he actually thank her, or would this be the beginning of something even more dangerous? As the minutes passed, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn she could never undo. The room still felt heavy with tension as Dante turned his back to Emily and returned to his seat. The atmosphere was thick, and Emily could feel the eyes of everyone on her. The men at the table, the staff in the kitchen, even the guests who had no idea of the storm brewing in the shadows. She had spoken the truth, and now it was out of her hands. For a moment, Emily stood frozen, trying to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. She had saved his life. Dante Romano, the feared mob boss who controlled half the city, was still alive because of her. But the reality of it felt distant, like she had stepped into someone else's story. She glanced around, trying to calm her racing heart. The sound of clinking silverware, the hum of murmured conversation, and the soft shuffle of footsteps echoed in her ears, but none of it felt real. Everything was moving around her, and she was stuck in the eye of the storm. Dante's men returned shortly, and they weren't alone. A few of them were carrying something, a large, old-fashioned briefcase. Emily didn't have to guess what was inside. She had seen enough of this world to recognize the kind of business they were dealing with. But to her surprise, Dante didn't rush into action. Instead, he sat there, his expression unreadable as he stared at the briefcase. Emily had expected him to be angry, or at the very least, to demand answers from her. But he just sat there, his fingers tapping slowly on the edge of the table. "You didn't have to do this," he said, his voice low but steady. Emily's throat tightened. "I couldn't just let you die." She had no other words for it. The danger had been real, and she knew it. Dante looked at her for a long time, his gaze softening just a little. For a moment, he didn't look like a mob boss at all. He looked like a man who had been caught off guard, like a man who had been shown a kindness he didn't expect. It was strange, seeing him like this. She had seen him in the news, read about his ruthless ways. To her, he had always been a figure of power, untouchable. But now, for the first time, she was seeing a side of him that didn't match the stories. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Not many people would have the nerve to speak up like you did." Emily wasn't sure how to respond. She hadn't expected him to say anything like that. She had thought he would either dismiss her or get angry, but instead, he seemed impressed. She couldn't be sure. Dante leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her face. "You've made an impression on me," he said. "Most people wouldn't risk their lives to save someone like me. But you did." Emily felt a mix of relief and confusion. She had saved his life, but that didn't mean she understood him. There was so much she didn't know about this world, and part of her still felt like she was in over her head. "I didn't do it for you," she said quietly. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." She had said it without thinking, and once the words were out, she realized how much she meant it. The room went silent for a moment, and Emily could feel the weight of the moment. She had been honest, and now there was no turning back. Dante seemed to consider her words for a long time before he spoke again. "I respect that," he said finally. "But you don't realize the danger you're in, do you?" Emily looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "You've just crossed a line," he said, his voice colder now. "You've helped me, and that puts you in my world. My world isn't safe for anyone who isn't already part of it. You could have just walked away tonight. But now, you're involved." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had known the risks, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so much more real. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a part of his world, a world full of violence, betrayal, and danger. Emily's heart raced as she processed the weight of his words. She had made a choice, but now she wasn't sure if it was the right one. Dante stood up, his presence commanding as he walked toward her. He paused just in front of her, his dark eyes searching hers. "You've got two choices now," he said, his voice low. "You can walk away, forget this ever happened, and go back to your normal life. Or you can stay, and I'll make sure you're protected. But understand, if you choose to stay, you're in this for good. No turning back." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. There was no easy answer. Part of her wanted to run, to escape the chaos she had just stepped into. But another part of her felt something else, a strange pull toward him, toward the world he controlled. She didn't know what the right choice was, but she knew that whatever happened, her life was never going to be the same again. "I'll stay," she said quietly, her voice steady, though her heart was anything but. Dante gave a small nod, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "Good," he said, "because I'm going to need you." The words hung in the air between them, and Emily couldn't help but wonder what she had just gotten herself into. Dante's words echoed in Emily's mind as she left the restaurant with him that night. The air outside felt cooler, sharper, but it wasn't just the temperature that made her shiver. The weight of what she had just agreed to hung over her like a heavy fog. She was in this now, truly in his world. There was no turning back. Dante's sleek black car pulled up to the curb, the driver waiting as the doors opened. He motioned for Emily to get in, and after a moment of hesitation, she did. As the car sped through the streets of the city, Dante remained silent, his eyes focused on the road ahead, his jaw clenched. The silence between them was heavy, almost suffocating, and Emily wasn't sure if it was the tension of the night still lingering or if it was something else, something between them. She had never felt so out of place, and yet so pulled toward someone at the same time. The city outside was alive, bustling, but inside the car, it felt like the rest of the world didn't exist. Finally, Dante spoke. "You've done more than I expected." His voice was calm, controlled, but there was a trace of something else in it now, something softer. Emily looked at him, unsure of how to respond. "I did what I thought was right," she said quietly. "You didn't have to," he replied, his tone shifting slightly. "But you did." She could feel his eyes on her, even though he was still looking ahead. It wasn't the look of a mafia boss or a man who ruled with an iron fist. It was a look of something else, something human. The car made its way through the city streets, weaving in and out of traffic. Dante's home wasn't far from the restaurant, but but Emily wasn't sure what to expect when they got there. She had only seen the outside of his world, the part that made headlines, that got talked about in whispers. But tonight, she was going deeper into it, and there was no going back. When the car finally pulled up to a large, gated estate, Emily's breath caught in her throat. The mansion was massive, towering over the city skyline, its lights casting long shadows on the ground. She had never seen anything like it before. This was a world she had never imagined, and now she was part of it. Dante stepped out of the car first, then held the door open for her. As she stepped onto the cobblestone driveway, she could feel the weight of the moment. The silence was heavy, filled with so many unspoken things. "Come on," he said, his voice soft but firm, breaking through her thoughts. "I'll show you around." They walked into the grand entryway of the house, the marble floors gleaming under the soft light. The walls were adorned with expensive artwork, and the scent of expensive wood and leather filled the air. It was everything she had expected from someone like Dante Romano. It was powerful, intimidating, and beautiful all at once. But as they moved through the house, Emily began to notice the subtle details, the small things that made it feel like a home, not just a fortress of wealth. The room they entered was filled with old bookshelves, soft lighting, and a large fireplace. Dante gestured for her to sit, and she did, still unsure of what was going to happen next. He poured them both drinks, a fine whiskey that seemed to fit the occasion. As he handed her the glass, their fingers brushed, and for a brief moment, Emily could feel the heat of his touch. It sent a strange shiver down her spine. "I didn't expect you to stay," he said, his eyes studying her closely. "Why did you?" Emily took a deep breath, the drink in her hand feeling heavier than it should have. "Because you needed help," she said honestly. "And maybe I needed to do the right thing for once." Dante looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He sat down across from her, leaning back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. There was a long silence between them, the kind that felt like it was stretching forever, but Emily didn't look away. "You've crossed a line now," Dante said finally, his voice low. "There's no going back from this." Emily swallowed, unsure of what to say. She had already made her decision, but now, as the weight of it settled in, she wondered if she had made the right one. Dante's eyes softened slightly, though his expression remained serious. "You don't realize what kind of world you're stepping into. It's dangerous. It's ruthless. I can handle it," Emily said, her voice steady. She wasn't sure if she could, but she had to believe it. She couldn't go back to the life she had before, the life where everything was safe and predictable. "You think you can," Dante said with a slight smirk. "But the world you're in now isn't one that gives second chances." Emily nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She had stepped into a world that didn't forgive mistakes, a world that would take everything from her if she wasn't careful. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'm not going to back down." Dante studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense. Then, without a word, he stood up and walked to the large window that overlooked the city. He stared out at the lights below, his face unreadable. Emily could feel the tension in the room, the weight of what she had just agreed to. She was in this world now, whether she was ready for it or not. "You'll learn," Dante said, his voice quiet, but his words carrying the same authority they always had. "And I'll be watching." The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. Emily wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life had just changed forever. The next few days passed in a blur for Emily. She had agreed to stay, and now, every moment felt like she was stepping deeper into a world she didn't fully understand. Dante's mansion, the lavish parties, the constant hum of luxury surrounding her. It all felt surreal, but it was her new reality. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a part of his world, whether she liked it or not. Dante kept his distance, but his eyes were always on her. He didn't speak much, but his presence was enough. His men watched her, too. Every time she walked through the hallways, every time she stepped into a room, they were there, observing, measuring, judging. Emily had always been able to read people, but in this world, she felt like she was the one being read. She couldn't help but feel the weight of their expectations, their silent assessments. She had no choice but to adjust. Every morning, she would wake up in a room that was far more luxurious than she had ever imagined. The sheets were silk, the furniture antique, the view from the window breathtaking. But it wasn't the view that kept her awake at night. It was the uncertainty. She didn't know what Dante wanted from her, or why she was still here. Was it just because she had saved his life? Or was there something more? That question lingered in the back of her mind as she worked, trying to blend in with the staff, while still keeping her eyes open. Then one afternoon, it happened. She was called into Dante's study, a room that was as intimidating as the man himself. It was filled with dark wood furniture, leather-bound books, and art that made her feel small. Dante was standing by the window, looking out over the city. His back was to her, but she could feel his presence in the room. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, her voice steady but her heart racing. Dante didn't turn around immediately. He stood there for a moment, his shoulders tense, his hands resting on the windowsill. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost contemplative. "I've been thinking," he said, his tone measured, "about what you said that night." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. What he said that night? She had barely processed the words herself. "You mean about the danger?" she asked, unsure of where this was going. Dante nodded, his gaze still fixed on the city below. "There's more danger here than you realize, Emily," he said, his voice now carrying an edge. "Not just the kind you saw that night, but something much deeper. There are people in this world who would kill to see me fall. And now that you're involved, you're a target too." Emily's stomach dropped. She had known the risks, but hearing him say it out loud made it all too real. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. "I didn't ask for this," she said, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "I didn't want to be involved in all of this." Dante turned to face her then, his dark eyes locking with hers. For the first time since she had met him, his gaze wasn't cold or distant. It was intense, almost searching. "I know you didn't," he said quietly, "but you are. And now, you need to make a choice. Stay out of it and risk everything, or step up and make sure you don't get caught in the crossfire." Emily's mind raced. She had been running from danger her entire life. Every choice she made, every step she took, had been calculated to keep her safe. But now, she realized, safety wasn't an option. Dante was right. She was already in this world, and there was no turning back. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if he was weighing her commitment. "I want you to learn," he said, his voice firm. "You've got potential. You see things others don't. You've got instincts I can use. But if you're going to be a part of this world, you need to understand how it works. I'll teach you, but you'll have to trust me." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. Trust him? She wasn't sure if she could trust anyone in this world. But she had no choice. She had already made her decision. She had already chosen to stay, to play this dangerous game. "Okay," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'll trust you." Dante nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good," he said. "Because once you're in, there's no turning back." Emily wasn't sure what exactly she was getting herself into, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life was no longer her own. She was now a part of this world, a world full of power, danger, and consequences. And if she was going to survive, she was going to have to learn quickly. The days following Emily's decision were both a blur and a slow crawl. She had chosen to stay, and now, the weight of that choice hung heavily on her shoulders. Dante's world, one that she had only glimpsed before, was now her reality. The mansion, with its opulent halls and guarded secrets, felt both like a prison and a sanctuary. She was living a life she had never imagined, surrounded by power and danger. Dante had kept his word. He started showing her the ropes, but it wasn't like anything she had expected. It wasn't just about learning how to navigate the mafia world. It was about survival. Dante had been true to his word, but there was something about him that remained elusive. He was distant, controlled, always watching, always calculating. She could never fully read him, not even after spending so much time with him. It was both unnerving and captivating. She had learned to listen to her instincts, but with Dante, she felt like they were constantly being tested. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Dante called her into his office. It was a spacious room, filled with dark wood and leather, the faint smell of cigars lingering in the air. He was standing by the window, staring out at the sprawling city beneath them. For a moment, Emily just stood there, watching him, unsure of what was going to happen next. "You've been doing well," Dante said, without turning to face her. His voice was calm, But there was something different in it this time. Something that made her pause. "I've been watching," he continued. "And I think it's time you understood more." Emily swallowed hard, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what he meant by that. She had seen the dangerous side of this world already, the betrayal, the ruthlessness, the power plays. But now, it seemed like Dante was preparing her for something bigger, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. "I've taught you the basics," he said, turning to face her now. His eyes locked with hers, and for the first time, Emily saw something in his gaze that she couldn't quite place, a flicker of something softer, almost vulnerable. "But there's more to it than what I've shown you," he continued. "There are layers to this world. There are things you need to know if you're going to survive in it." Emily nodded, her mind racing. "What do I need to know?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease building inside her. Dante walked toward his desk, leaning back against it as he regarded her. "You're in deeper than you realize, Emily," he said quietly. "It's not just about keeping quiet, doing your job. It's about loyalty, power, alliances. There are people in this world who would sell you out the second you turn your back. And there are others who will do whatever it takes to keep you by their side." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of his words sank in. She had known it was dangerous, but now she was hearing it from him. Dante wasn't just a mafia boss. He was a man who understood the cost of loyalty, the price of trust. "You're asking me to choose sides," she said softly. Dante gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "In this world, you're either with us, or you're against us," he said. "And if you're against us, there's no coming back." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She had already made her choice when she saved his life that night, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel more real. She was in this now, for better or worse. "I'm with you," she said quietly. "I understand." Dante's eyes softened slightly, but only for a moment. He pushed off the desk and walked toward the door. "Good," he said, his voice low and serious. "Because if you're going to be a part of this, you need to be prepared for anything. Trust no one, not even me." Emily looked at him, her stomach tightening. She had thought she understood this world, but now, with Dante's words hanging in the air, she realized how little she truly knew. This wasn't just a game. This was survival. As Dante opened the door and motioned for her to follow, Emily's mind raced with questions. What had she gotten herself into? Was she really ready for what was to come? But as she stepped into the hallway and followed him, she realized that there was no turning back. She had chosen this life, and now, she had to learn how to live in it. Dante led her down the long corridor, his steps echoing in the silence. As they passed through the mansion, Emily could feel the tension in the air. The silence between them was heavy, but she wasn't sure if it was because of the words they had just shared or something else. Dante stopped in front of a large door, and with a glance toward her, he opened it. The room was dark, with only a few dim lights illuminating the space. It was a meeting room, with a long table at the center and a few chairs around it. A few of his men were already seated, their eyes immediately snapping to Emily as she walked in behind Dante. She could feel their gaze on her, calculating, sizing her up. Dante didn't speak at first. He simply walked to the head of the table and sat down, his gaze never leaving Emily. He motioned for her to take a seat. As she sat across from him, she realized that this wasn't just a simple meeting. It was a test to see if she could handle the pressure of this world. Dante leaned forward slightly, his voice low. "We're going to see how much you've learned," he said. "This is your first real lesson. Pay attention." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Emily's heart raced as she realized just how far she had come. This was her moment. This was where she would prove herself, or fall short. And for the first time, she felt the weight of her decision. She was in this world now, for better or worse. The days after the meeting felt like a turning point for Emily. Dante had put her through a test, and though she had passed, she couldn't shake the weight of his words. "Trust no one, not even me." Those words haunted her every time she walked through the halls of his mansion, every time she glanced at the men who watched her with calculating eyes. She had stepped into a world of power, danger, and alliances that could shift in the blink of an eye. Every move she made, every word she said, felt like it could be the difference between survival and destruction. The following week, Dante kept her close, assigning her tasks that tested her resolve. He was watching, always watching, but never letting on whether she was meeting his expectations. It was like being under a microscope. One evening, After a long day of work, Emily found herself in the kitchen, alone, preparing dinner for the household. The silence in the house was unsettling. No matter how many times she had been there, the stillness of the mansion always felt unnatural. It wasn't long before she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to find Dante standing in the doorway, his eyes as piercing as ever. "I need you to come with me," he said, his voice calm but firm. Emily's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't unusual for him to summon her, but something about the way he said it made her stomach churn. Without asking any questions, she nodded and followed him out of the kitchen. They walked through the grand halls of the mansion, and for the first time, Emily felt the full weight of the place. The shadows seemed darker, the silence heavier. They stopped in front of a large, reinforced door. Dante turned to her. "This is where things get real," he said. "What happens in here stays in here." "Understood." Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Dante opened the door, revealing a large, windowless room with a table in the center. There were two men seated at the table, their faces obscured by shadows. One of them stood as they entered, his eyes sizing Emily up. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and looked like someone who had seen more than his fair share of violence. He wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. "This is Emily," Dante said, his tone almost casual, but there was an edge to it. "She's here to learn." The man gave a curt nod, but his gaze lingered on Emily, making her feel uneasy. "Take a seat," Dante instructed, gesturing to the chair across from the two men. Emily hesitated for only a moment before sitting down. The tension in the room was palpable. Dante moved to the other side of the room, standing near the wall with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before him. "What's this about?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You'll see," the man replied. "You're about to learn just how deep this world really goes." He turned to the other man and nodded. The second man, who had remained silent until now, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a set of documents. He slid them across the table toward Emily. "These are some of our most important contacts," the first man said. "But the problem is, one of them has been playing both sides, betraying us." Emily's heart raced as she looked at the papers in front of her. She knew these weren't just ordinary documents. They were part of something bigger, something far more dangerous. "What are you asking me to do?" she asked, still trying to keep her composure. The first man leaned forward, his gaze intense. "We need you to help us make sure this person is taken care of," he said. "We can't afford to have anyone in our circle who can't be trusted." Emily looked at Dante, whose expression remained unchanged. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to," Dante said quietly, his voice carrying an undertone of something like respect. "But understand this, loyalty in this world is everything. And if you don't have it, you're a liability." The word struck her like a cold slap to the face. Loyalty. It was a concept she had always valued, but here, it meant something different. It meant survival. It meant that if you weren't with them, you were against them. Emily sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had known from the start that this world wasn't kind, but now it was becoming all too real. The man sitting across from her watched her with a look that said he wasn't going to make this easy. He was testing her, just like Dante had. And if she failed, there would be consequences. "Do you want to be a part of this, or not?" the man asked. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she realized the magnitude of the decision she was about to make. This wasn't just about saving Dante's life anymore. It was about whether she was ready to live in this world, a world where betrayal could come from anyone, and loyalty was everything. She looked at Dante, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It was a silent understanding. He was giving her the choice. "I'm in," she said finally, her voice steady, though her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Dante nodded, and the man across from her smirked. "Good," he said. "We'll see how you handle this." As the meeting ended, and Emily was escorted out of the room, she couldn't help but feel the weight of what had just happened. She had made her choice, but now, she had to prove she was worthy of it. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. Emily walked out of the meeting room, her heart racing with every step. The weight of her decision sat heavily on her chest. She had crossed a line, one she could never uncross. She was officially in this world now, a world that had no mercy for the weak or the unsure. As the door closed behind her, she could still feel the eyes of the men watching her, sizing her up. The decision had been made. Dante had given her a choice, and she had chosen to stand with him. The room was silent as she walked down the corridor, the weight of what had just transpired pressing in on her. Her mind raced, trying to process everything she had just agreed to. She could still hear the voices of the men, their words echoing in her ears. Loyalty in this world is everything. If you don't have it, you're a liability. Those words, spoken by Dante, held more truth than she cared to admit. Loyalty. It meant survival here. It meant power. It meant that if you didn't give everything, you were nothing. She had learned that lesson, and now, she had to live by it. Dante's world was a dangerous one, full of shifting alliances and deadly power plays. Every decision had consequences, and every move had to be calculated. Emily had always prided herself on her ability to read people, but in this world, the stakes were higher. She couldn't afford to make mistakes. As she made her way through the mansion, her thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her. Emily. She turned to see Dante standing in the doorway of his office, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he gestured for her to come inside. She stepped into the room, her heart pounding in her chest. Dante was standing by the window, his back to her, staring out at the city. "Have a seat," he said, his voice calm. Emily obeyed, sitting down in the chair across from him. The silence between them was thick, the tension palpable. After what felt like an eternity, Dante finally spoke. "You've made your choice," he said, his voice low but steady. "Now you need to understand what that means." Emily nodded, her stomach churning. She had a feeling she wasn't going to like what was coming next. "You're not just here to help," Dante continued, turning to face her. "You're part of this now. You need to understand that everything you do reflects on me, on this organization. And if you slip up, it's not just your life on the line." Emily swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Dante studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "Do you?" he asked quietly. "Because loyalty isn't just about doing what you're told. It's about trust. And right now, you need to prove you can be trusted." Emily nodded again, her mind spinning. She had already saved his life, but now she had to do more than that. She had to prove she was worthy of his trust. She had to prove that she could handle this world. Dante walked toward her, his presence commanding. "I'm giving you a chance," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But make no mistake, if you fail, there are consequences." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She knew that already, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel all too real. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante looked at her for a long moment, then nodded toward the door. "Follow me," he said. As Emily stood and followed him down the hallway, her mind raced with possibilities. She had no idea what he was about to ask of her, but she knew it was going to be something important. They stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall. Dante opened it, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside, there were several men sitting at a table, papers scattered before them. They looked up as Dante entered, and their expressions shifted from casual to tense. "This is Emily," Dante said, his voice cold and commanding. "She's here to help with the next phase." The men didn't speak, but Emily could feel their eyes on her, sizing her up, judging her. She could see the doubt in their eyes, but she refused to let it show on her face. She was here, and she was going to prove herself. "You're going to help us with a situation," Dante continued, turning to face her. "There's a deal going down soon, and we need someone on the inside." Emily's stomach tightened at the mention of a deal. She had no idea what it entailed, but she knew it wasn't going to be simple. Dante didn't give her time to ask questions. "I'm trusting you with this," he said, his voice serious. "If anything goes wrong, it'll be on you." The weight of his words hit her harder than she expected. She was in this, no turning back. She had made her choice, and now it was time to prove she was worthy of it. As Dante walked out of the room, leaving her with the men, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. She had stepped into a world where loyalty, power, and trust meant everything, and she had to learn to navigate it, or she would become another casualty of the game. Emily's heart was pounding as she stood in the room with the men, the weight of Dante's trust pressing down on her. The stakes had never been higher. She could feel the eyes of the men on her, assessing her every move, wondering if she was truly capable of handling the pressure. The deal Dante had mentioned was about to go down, and Emily was about to be in the thick of it. Her role was clear: infiltrate, gain information, and ensure the deal went smoothly, all while maintaining the appearance of a trusted insider. But as she looked around the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being tested, not just by the men, but by Dante himself. He had trusted her with this mission, and she had to prove she was worthy of it. The tension in the room was palpable as the men discussed the logistics of the deal. Emily was silent, listening carefully, trying to make sense of what was being said. This wasn't just any deal. It involved significant amounts of money, and it was critical for Dante's organization. If anything went wrong, the consequences would be severe. She knew the risks. She knew that her life was on the line if she failed. "You'll be in charge of the logistics," one of the men said, his eyes flicking toward Emily. "Get the supplies to the location, make sure everything is in place. And keep your head down. This isn't the time for mistakes." Emily nodded, trying to keep her nerves in check. The weight of his words hung heavy on her. This was more than just a job. It was a test of loyalty, of competence, and of trust. Dante had given her this responsibility, and she couldn't afford to let him down. As the men continued to discuss the finer details, Emily's mind raced. She had been part of the plan, but there was so much she didn't know. Who were they meeting with? What was the real purpose behind the deal? Dante had given her only a small piece of the puzzle, and she knew it was up to her to figure out the rest. As the meeting drew to a close, Dante's voice broke through her thoughts. "You're ready," he said, looking at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. His words weren't just a compliment. They were a challenge. "Do not disappoint me." Emily nodded, though her heart was racing. She had no idea what was going to happen next, but she knew that there was no turning back. The game had begun, and she was now fully in it. The next few hours felt like a blur. Emily had to make sure everything was in place for the deal, and she couldn't afford to slip up. She made the arrangements, met with the right people, and ensured the plan was moving forward without a hitch. But even as she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was an undercurrent of tension that she couldn't ignore. It was like the calm before a storm, and Emily had learned long ago that when things seemed too calm in this world, that was when you had to be the most careful. She had no idea what Dante's true plans were, but she was about to find out. The time for questions was over. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. As the sun began to set, Emily found herself standing outside the warehouse where the deal was set to take place. She could feel the cold air biting at her skin, but it wasn't the chill that made her shiver. It was the sense of impending danger. This was the moment of truth. She had done everything right so far, but she knew that in this world, one wrong move could mean the end. The black cars pulled up, their engines humming as the doors opened. The men stepped out, their faces unreadable, their bodies tense. Dante's men, the ones who had been watching her so closely, moved in behind her. She was part of this now. She was one of them. The other party arrived shortly after, their presence as commanding as the men who accompanied Dante. The tension was thick in the air as the deal went down, but Emily's focus remained sharp. She observed every movement, every gesture, every word. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was her test. The deal was going smoothly, but then something shifted. One of the men from the opposing side suddenly made a move that was too quick, too calculated. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she realized what was happening. The deal was a setup. This wasn't just about money. It was about power. Dante had known all along, and now it was up to her to play her part. She acted without thinking, moving quickly to alert Dante's men. The situation escalated faster than she could process. But she didn't hesitate. She did what she had been trained to do. Protect Dante, protect the deal, and make sure the plan stayed intact. Gunshots rang out in the distance, but Emily didn't flinch. She was in control now, her instincts guiding her every move. In the chaos of the moment, she knew one thing for certain. Dante had been right. This world was ruthless, but it was also a world where loyalty meant everything. She had proven herself, and she wasn't going to let anyone forget it. As the dust settled and the deal concluded, Dante approached her. His gaze was steady, his expression unreadable, but Emily saw something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. "You did well," he said quietly, his voice low and sincere. "I knew I made the right choice." Emily met his gaze. her heart still racing from the events that had just unfolded. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady though. Her mind was still processing everything that had just happened. "I couldn't have done it without you," Dante replied, his voice softer now. "But remember this, in this world, loyalty is everything. If you prove yourself, you'll go far. If not, there's no place for you here." Emily nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She had passed the test. She had proven herself. But in this world, the price of failure was steep, and Emily knew she would have to keep proving herself every day. The game had changed, and she had become a player. The aftermath of the deal left Emily both shaken and strangely empowered. She had proven herself in the eyes of Dante and his men, but the thrill of the victory was short-lived. The weight of the world was still pressing down on her, and she knew that one small mistake could cost her everything. Dante had seen something in her, something he respected, but in this world, respect wasn't enough. Loyalty was the currency that mattered most. That night, after the chaos had settled and the deal was finalized, Emily sat in her room, the door locked, her back pressed against the cold stone wall. She replayed every detail of the confrontation in her mind, trying to make sense of how it all went down. The gunshots, the frantic whispers, the tense faces of everyone involved. It had all happened so fast. She had acted on instinct, but she couldn't afford to rely on instinct alone anymore. She had to understand the game. She needed to be more than just a pawn. But as much as she wanted to think about strategy and survival, her mind kept returning to one thing: Dante. Every interaction with him had been a game, but there was something behind his eyes that told her he was more than just a powerful mafia boss. He was playing his own game, and she was just a piece in it. But what did that mean for her? And where did she fit into all of this? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Her heart skipped a beat. She stood, moving toward the door quickly, her pulse racing. She didn't expect anyone, especially not this late. When she opened the door, she found Dante standing there, his expression unreadable, his eyes dark with something she couldn't quite place. "You did well today," he said, his voice low. The words didn't feel like a compliment. They felt more like a warning. "Thanks," Emily replied, though her throat tightened. "I wasn't sure how it would play out, but it worked." Dante's lips twisted into something like a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It worked because you kept your head, but there's more to it than just playing it safe. There are decisions you make in this world that come with consequences. Every time you act, it's like you're betting your life on the turn of a card." Emily's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Dante stepped into the room, his gaze fixed on her. "What I mean is that we are playing a dangerous game, and you're in the middle of it now. You want to survive, you have to make the right calls. But the problem is, Emily, you don't know who to trust yet." The weight of his words sank in, and Emily felt a chill run through her. She had known that loyalty was everything, but hearing Dante say it like that made it feel even more real. She wasn't just playing for her life anymore. She was playing for power. "You've made an impression on the people around you," Dante continued. "But impressions fade, and they can turn into targets. You're not just a waitress anymore. You're a part of my world, and that comes with a cost." Emily's breath caught in her throat. The words "part of my world" echoed in her head. She had known the risks, but hearing Dante say it like this made everything more tangible. She was in deeper than she had thought. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante's gaze softened, just a little, but there was something cold in his eyes that made her heart race. "What I want," he said, his voice steady, "is for you to stop being afraid. You've already proven you can handle yourself in this world. But if you keep second-guessing yourself, you'll get killed before you know it." Emily nodded, but it was hard to shake the feeling that Dante was testing her, pushing her in ways she wasn't ready for. She had saved his life, but now, he was asking more from her. He was asking her to trust him. But how could she trust him when she couldn't even trust herself in this world? "You're in this, whether you like it or not," Dante said, his tone softening just a little. "And now it's time to prove it. We've got a new target, and you're going to be the one to handle it. We don't have time for hesitation, Emily. This is how it's done." Emily's stomach dropped. A target. It was exactly what she had been afraid of. She had stepped into this world, thinking she could navigate it carefully, but now, it seemed like there were no safe moves left. "Who is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dante's eyes narrowed. "A traitor. Someone who thinks they can double-cross me." They won't get the chance to do it again. Emily's pulse quickened as she realized what he was saying. This wasn't just about a deal gone wrong anymore. This was about power and eliminating threats before they had a chance to grow. You want me to kill them? She asked, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Dante looked at her with an unreadable expression. You don't have to kill anyone, he said slowly. But in this world, sometimes it's the only way to survive. If you want to play, you have to make the hard choices. Emily stood frozen, the weight of the decision crushing her. She hadn't signed up for this, but here she was, with Dante watching her every move, expecting her to make a choice that could change everything. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about loyalty. This was about power. And Emily had to decide if she was willing to pay the price. She took a deep breath and nodded. I'll do it, she said, though her voice trembled slightly. Dante's gaze softened again, but this time, there was something like respect in his eyes. Good, he said. Now you're ready. Emily knew that the road ahead was going to be dangerous, but there was no turning back now. She had made her choice. The night felt heavier than any night before as Emily stepped out of her room, her decision still echoing through her mind. She had agreed to move forward with Dante's order, but every step she took felt like she was walking deeper into a place she could never escape. The mansion was quiet, almost unnervingly so, with only the faint hum of distant activity reminding her she was not alone. The hallways were dimly lit, the shadows long and heavy, and Emily could feel the weight of the silence pressing in around her. She had never felt more aware of her place in this world, or how dangerous it had become. Dante was waiting for her in his study, and when she walked through the door, he was standing at the window again, staring out into the darkness beyond the estate walls. His posture was tense, his hands resting against the glass as though he was trying to hold himself steady. He did not turn when she entered, but he spoke in a low voice that sent a chill through her. You are not the same woman who walked into my restaurant that night. Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. She was not sure if his words were meant as praise or as a warning. I had to change, she said quietly. This world does not let people stay the same. Dante finally turned, his dark eyes locking onto hers. His gaze was intense, as though he was searching for something deep within her. You are right, he said, his voice steady but softer now. But I need you to understand something. What you agreed to do tonight, it will change you forever. You do not get to go back after this. Emily swallowed hard. She already knew that. The decision she made was not one she could undo, no matter how this night ended. I made my choice, she said, and I will stand by it. Dante walked toward her slowly, each step deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. You think this is about proving something to me, he said, but it is not about me. It is about you understanding what kind of world you are choosing to be part of. Emily held his gaze, refusing to look away. I understand enough, she said, though her voice trembled slightly. I know what is at stake. Do you? Dante's voice dipped lower. Because once you confront this man, once you look him in the eyes, you will understand what it means to carry the weight of a decision you cannot undo. And not everyone survives that weight. Emily felt her chest tighten. She knew Dante was trying to warn her, trying to make her think twice. But she had already thought it through. She had been thinking about it every moment since he told her what needed to be done. I can handle it, she said. Dante studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly he nodded. Follow me, he said. They walked through the mansion, down a flight of stairs she had never noticed before. The air grew colder, heavier, and Emily could feel her heartbeat growing faster with every step. At the bottom of the stairs was a reinforced door guarded by two men. They stepped aside when they saw Dante, their faces stoic. Dante opened the door, and inside was a small, dim room with a metal chair positioned under a single light. A man sat in the chair, his hands bound, his expression tight with fear and defiance. He looked up when Dante walked in, his eyes darting from him to Emily. The recognition in his gaze made Emily's stomach twist. This was not just some random enemy. This was one of Dante's trusted men. Or so they had thought. He betrayed us, Dante said quietly, his voice steady. He sold information to a rival organization. Information that would have gotten you killed the night you saved me. Emily's breath caught. She stared at the man, her heart pounding in her ears. She had not expected that. She had not known she had been a target that night as well. The man's eyes widened, and he began to plead, his voice shaking. Please, it was not what you think. I was forced. I did not want to betray the organization. Dante raised a hand, silencing him immediately. Then he looked at Emily. This is your moment, he said. Not to harm him, but to decide what happens next. You choose whether he walks out of here, or whether he never does. Emily felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She had thought she understood what Dante wanted, but now she realized this was about something deeper. This was not about violence. It was about judgment, about power, about whether she was capable of making choices that shaped the future of this world she had stepped into. Emily stepped closer, her pulse racing. The man stared up at her, his eyes full of fear. Dante watched her carefully, waiting. Emily took a slow breath. She thought about everything she had seen, everything she had learned, everything she had become. Then, her voice steady, she said, he walks out. But he never comes back. He is done with this world. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly he nodded. You chose mercy, he said quietly. That is something rare in this world. Emily stood tall, her chest rising with a deep breath. Mercy is not weakness, she said. Dante's eyes softened, and he gave a slight nod. You are right, he said. And because of that, you just changed everything. The room felt suddenly still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Emily had made her judgment, and for the first time, she realized that her voice, her choice, had real power in Dante's world. The moment Emily delivered her verdict, a strange stillness washed over the room. The single light above the bound man flickered slightly, casting long shadows across the cold concrete floor. Dante's expression did not change immediately, but something in his eyes shifted. It was not disappointment. It was not anger. It was something quieter, deeper, something that felt like acknowledgement. Emily stepped back, her heart still pounding from the weight of the decision she had just made. She had expected resistance. She had expected Dante to push back or question her judgment. But instead, he simply looked at her with an unreadable intensity. Mercy in this world is rare, Dante said quietly, his voice low but steady. But sometimes it takes more strength to show mercy than to take revenge. The bound man stared at Emily with a mix of confusion and overwhelming relief. He had been prepared for the worst. He had seen enough in Dante's world to know that betrayals were usually final. But Emily's voice had changed the air in the room. It had changed everything. Dante turned to his men. Release him, he said. The guards hesitated for a moment. This was unusual. Dante did not give second chances lightly. But as soon as they saw the way he was looking at Emily, they obeyed without question. The ropes were cut. The man stood slowly, his legs trembling, his eyes fixed on the floor. Dante pointed toward the exit. You walk out of here alive, he said. But you never step into my world again. If you do, you will not receive mercy twice. The man nodded frantically and stumbled toward the door. As the heavy door closed behind him, Emily exhaled slowly, her body finally releasing the tension she had been holding. She had made the right choice. She could feel it deep in her chest. But she also knew that mercy came with risks. Dante walked toward her, stopping just a foot away. He looked down at her with those dark, unreadable eyes, the ones that always seemed to see deeper than anyone else. You surprised me, he said calmly. Most people in this world choose fear. They choose violence. But you chose something different. Emily held his gaze. I chose what I could live with, she said. I cannot become someone I do not recognize. Dante's expression softened, but only slightly. That is exactly why I need you here, he said. Because you see things differently. You see people differently. Emily felt her breath catch. Is that why you brought me here? She asked quietly. Is that why you have kept me close? Dante looked away for a moment, as though searching for the right words. For the first time since she met him, he seemed almost human. When you saved my life that night, he said slowly, I realized something. You saw danger no one else noticed. You saw betrayal no one else sensed. And now, you see a path forward that I have not taken in a long time. Emily blinked, unsure of how to respond. Dante continued, I have lived my life making enemies fear me. I have built an empire on power, on control, on force. But fear does not inspire loyalty. It only forces obedience. And obedience breaks the moment fear fades. His voice dropped lower. But mercy builds loyalty that does not crumble. Emily felt her chest tighten. She had not expected Dante to speak this way, to reveal so much. That man you spared, Dante said. will spend the rest of his life knowing he owes his survival to you. And he will speak of you with reverence, not terror. That matters more than you understand. Emily looked down, her hands trembling slightly. I did not do it to make him loyal, she said softly. I did it because it was right. Dante stepped closer, his presence overwhelming but not frightening. And that, he said, is why you are the most dangerous person in this room. Emily's eyes widened slightly, but Dante continued, his tone steady. People who seek power can be predicted, controlled, managed. His gaze softened. But people who act from conscience, they cannot be bought or bent. And that makes them rare and powerful. Emily felt her heart race. She had never seen herself that way. She was just trying to survive, just trying to hold onto the sliver of humanity she still had left. Dante reached out, his hand hovering near her shoulder, but he did not touch her. You carry a kind of strength I have not seen in a long time, he said. And it changes things. It changes me. Emily's breath hitched at his final words. He held her gaze for a long, suspended moment, one that felt like the air itself refused to move. Then Dante drew back slightly, his voice steady again. Rest tonight, he said. Tomorrow, everything shifts, and you will need your strength. Emily nodded, though she felt the world tilting under her feet. As she walked out of the room, her footsteps echoed in the hallway, each one reminding her of the truth Dante had spoken. She was in this world now. She had made a choice that could not be undone. But for the first time, she realized something else. Her presence was not just changing her. It was changing Dante. And in a world ruled by fear, that change might be the most dangerous force of all. Dawn broke slowly over the Romano estate, the soft golden light spilling through the tall windows and stretching across the marble floors like a quiet promise. Emily stood alone in the hallway outside her room, the stillness wrapping around her like a whispered warning. Everything Dante had said the night before replayed in her mind, each word heavy with meaning. She had changed things, and now everything around her was shifting because of it. As she stepped into the main hall, she caught sight of Dante standing near the grand staircase. His men were gathered around him, their voices low, their expressions tense. But when Dante saw Emily, something in his posture eased. He dismissed his men with a slight nod, and they scattered without protest. For a moment, it was just the two of them, standing in the quiet morning light. You slept? Dante asked, his voice calm, but carrying an undertone she could not quite name. Not much, Emily replied honestly. Too much to think about. Dante nodded, stepping closer. Everything changed last night, he said. You set a new tone for this house, for this organization, whether you meant to or not. Emily felt a small pang of worry. Did I make things harder for you? She asked quietly. Dante shook his head. Harder? No. Unexpected, yes. But not harder. He paused, studying her. Emily, you showed everyone in this house something they had forgotten. That mercy is not weakness. It is power. And now they see it, even if they do not understand it yet. Emily took a slow breath, letting his words settle. She had not intended to make a statement. She had simply acted according to her conscience. But in this world, even simple actions carried weight. Dante gestured for her to follow him, and together they walked through the long hallway toward the east wing of the estate. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting shifting patterns on the walls. There is something I want to show you, Dante said as they approached a set of double doors Emily had never been through. He pushed them open, revealing a room filled with old photographs, documents, and items that looked like pieces of a life Dante rarely spoke about. Emily stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. She saw pictures of Dante as a young boy, standing beside his father. A family she had never heard him mention. A world he had locked away. Dante walked to a table in the center of the room and picked up a framed photo. Emily moved closer, recognizing the man beside Dante's younger self. Your father? She asked. Dante nodded. He built everything you see here. But he ruled through fear, not loyalty. He believed mercy was a weakness. Dante's voice grew quieter, more thoughtful. When he died, I inherited not just his empire, but his enemies, his debts, and his mistakes. I swore I would do things differently. But over time, I became what I swore I would never become. He turned to Emily, his gaze steady. Until you walked into my life and reminded me who I wanted to be. Emily felt her chest tighten. She had never imagined she would have that kind of impact on someone like Dante. She had seen him, as powerful, intimidating, unreachable. But in this room, surrounded by pieces of his past, he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. "I did not mean to change you," she said softly. "I was just trying to survive." Dante shook his head. "No, you were doing more than surviving. You were choosing the harder path. And that is what this world needs." Emily let his words linger before she asked, "So what happens now?" Dante took a slow breath and set the photo down. "Now, things will be different," he said. "Not just for me. For all of us." He walked toward her, stopping just inches away. "I want you by my side. Not as an assistant, not as someone learning the ropes, but as someone whose judgment I trust. Someone who sees what others overlook. Someone who will keep this world from collapsing into darkness." Emily felt her pulse quicken. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I am not like you. I do not understand all the rules of this world." Dante gave a small, rare smile. "That is exactly why I need you. Because you do not play by the rules of this world. And that makes you the only one who can change it." The words settled over her like a quiet truth. She had been pulled into this world by accident, by instinct, by an act of courage she hadn't fully understood. But now she realized she had a place here, a purpose. Emily nodded slowly, her voice steady. "Then I will stand with you," she said. "Not because I am not afraid, but because I believe in what you are trying to become." Dante's eyes softened, and for the first time, there was something warm in them. Something human. Something hopeful. "Then we begin," he said. "A new way. A better one." Emily looked out toward the sunlight pouring through the windows, the world outside waking to a new day. Everything had changed, and she knew it would never be the same again. Through quiet steps, through impossible choices, through moments of mercy in a world of brutality, she had reshaped the fate of a man feared by many. And in doing so, she had reshaped her own. And that day, the world remembered what dignity looks like.